Smoky Mountain Magic by Horace Keppard, Chapter 2. Tom Burbank's home was only 10 miles from Kiowa, the county seat, but the road was so rough that a wagon never took less than 3 hours to make the trip. There was a mountain to cross. The last 5 miles from town were through virgin forest. The creek had to be forded 17 times in those 5 miles. The bottom of every ford was thickly strewn with slick, round boulders. After a heavy rain, the creek would be impassable until the flood ran down. The road ended at Tom's place. Beyond and on either side loomed the wilderness, mountain after mountain, mile high or more above sea level, each marked by climatic zones of vegetation, one group above another, so that magnolias of the south bloomed within sight of spruces like those of subarctic Canada. Sometime after the Civil War, a wandering hunter had found here the Eden of his heart's desire. He, like Daniel Boone when leaving Kentucky for the far west, was sick of what men call their laws and their justice. He sought wild, free woods where he might live by himself, unhampered and unbeholden, lord of himself and his surroundings. 10 miles up Deep Creek, after struggling through wild waters and along steep mountain walls, he found a place where the defiles spread apart to a width of 150 yards. Here was level bottom land sufficient for his needs. Projecting into it and commanding a view up and down the creek to the nearest bends was a low promontory, the flat-topped point of a ridge that was large enough for a house site and a garden. A clear, cold brook came from the mountain's heart and ran past this vantage point. Here, the hunter built a log cabin of 2 rooms with rough stone chimneys and a clapboard roof. And here he abode many a year. But the evil day came when an intruder built a hut within 5 miles of him, halfway up the creek from Kiowa. That was too close for the old-timer's comfort, so he moved and followed his daemon toward the setting sun. Then came tenants of a baser sort, one succeeding the other, woods loafers, shiftless folk, a sly and secretive breed, suspicious, fierce in the vanity of their own low caste. None of them stayed long on the place, but by turns they wore out the narrow strips of cornland, cut all firewood that stood handy, ravaged the cabin of shelves and loft floors to use as kindling, and left it a ramshackle, filthy pen. At last, Burbank came on the scene, induced to serve as warden for a timber company that now owned most of the surrounding wilderness. Tom and his thrifty wife cleaned up the old place, repaired it, added a kitchen wing, and fixed up the back room for company, if so be that visitors should ever come to such a far-off, lonesome place. 2 years now had they dwelt in this solitude, and in that time all the visitors they had entertained overnight were a few bear hunters, some timber cruisers, an itinerant missionary, and a fugitive from across the Smokies in Tennessee. Today, as Tom and Sylvia rested after their spell of house cleaning, little Margaret played in the front yard under a gnarled old apple tree where she kept her play purdies, the bits of bright tin and broken crockery that furnished her very own kitchenette. She swept the ground with a cedar spray and built a tottery bed of sticks for her rag doll, Josephine. The red hound drowsily watched her as he lay sunning with nose between his paws. Soft airs wafted from the woodland, bearing honey scent of basswood and spicy fragrance of azalea. Wild bees buzzed softly around the child, harmlessly minding their own affairs. Out of the deep forest back of the house came a low, dove-like twitter from a quillaree, as the mountain folk call the wood thrush. High overhead, the intense blue was mottled here and there with tufts of languorous white cloud. The world all round about was dreamy. But suddenly the hound sprang to his feet and bayed loud warning, his nose pointing down the creek where the road ran to town. Margaret jumped as if stung. One glance showed her a horseman coming. With the instinctive fear of intruders that she shared with the wild creatures of the woods, she spilled her playthings, snatched Josephine from her bed, and fled for the house as fast as her stumpy little legs could carry her. Sylvia, always alert, hurried to the porch. Tom, phlegmatic, relit his pipe before allowing curiosity to draw him to the doorway. "Looky yonder comin'," cried Sylvia, staring at a slim, khaki-clad figure approaching on a bay horse. "Some young sprout from town," conjectured Tom. "One of them furriners, likely, that gads about in soldier clothes and never shot a rabbit in his life." "Soldier nothing," disputed Sylvia. "Why, Tom, as I live and breathe, it's a woman, and her with breeches on." "Good Lord," sighed Tom, with mock concern. "Just when I left all my varmint traps in the woods, here comes a rare new specimen." "Tom, now have some manners. She may be somebody," cautioned Sylvia, meaning someone of consequence. "Yeah," agreed Tom. "Her body does look right slightly from here anyhow." Sylvia ignored him. She went down the porch steps and into the yard to greet the stranger. Outwardly calm, she felt her heart surging with excitement. For here came the first woman to venture so far up Deep Creek since the Burbanks settled in the backwoods. And she was coming alone. "Must be a brave gal or a fool one," thought Sylvia, eager to determine which. Girl and horse disappeared for a moment under the bank where the front yard abruptly dropped off and the pasture bottom began. The horse took the steep grade at a hand gallop. The girl came flying into view with hair waving and a merry whoop ringing from her pretty throat. Expertly she checked her horse and sprang from the saddle. A bewitching creature, all grace and friendliness and radiant good cheer. "Good morning," she saluted. "Is this where the Burbanks live?" "Yes, I'm Mrs. Burbank," answered Sylvia. This is my husband." She yearned to throw her arms around the happy, wholesome-looking girl, but native dignity was holding her in leash. Tom, however, was in no wise backward. He shook hands with the girl, took the bridle reins from her without asking leave, and hitched her horse to the apple tree as a mere matter of course. Folks who came to his place must stop and chat. "I'm Marion Wentworth," said the girl to Sylvia. "I'm in Kiowa for the summer and am collecting plants for our herbarium in college. This is a glorious collecting ground. I made some finds this morning on my way up here. Let me show you." She opened one of the saddlebags on her horse and brought out a light plant press, such as collectors use in the field. Unstrapping it, she laid out several specimens. "This is Pyralaria. Here's a twig of some strange crataegus that isn't in my botany. This is Morongia uncinata." "It's a what?" interrupted Tom. She repeated the Latin name and added, "sensitive briar." "Huh," grunted Tom. "We call it toe-each. You walk into it in your bare feet, and you get a lot of little prickles atween your toes that'll itch like flea bites." Marion laughed. "I don't suppose there have been many collectors up here. So much the better. I'm on virgin ground." "There was one last summer," said Tom. "He was a professor and was studying bugism. I went with him now and then to watch his capers and see he didn't come to no harm. He took right kindly to me and tried to give me an education in what spiders and tarantulas and daddy longlegs was good for. Well, one day he liked to had a fit. He'd captured a new species of granddaddy. You never seed a man take on so over a new baby or a prize calf. But now, what do you think that fool went and done?" "What did he do?" asked Marion. "Well, sir, ma'am, he went home and named that blasted granddaddy after me. Gave a long-legged stinky bug my name, and he printed it in a book." Marion struggled to keep her face straight. "But he meant to honor you," she explained. Tom looked daggers. "Honor me? Honor the bug, you mean? Just think, and I'll be John Henry if he didn't write me a letter saying that owing to me having showed sich an interest in science, he was naming a new species of helicopoop after me." Tom stuttered and choked. Under his breath, he said something the women were not to hear, but they did hear it, and they burst into inextinguishable laughter. Tom stalked off, muttering something about a passel of fools. Left to themselves, the women chatted freely. Marion said, "The woods are charming. I've never enjoyed a day more. But there are some evil-looking people in the last two cabins I passed on my way up here, just before one enters the big forest. Who are they?" "The Lumbos," a trifling set. "Two of the women made mean remarks as I passed, and they knew I overheard them. Do you think my breeches are unbecoming. Lawsy, I only wished I dared wear the like. Look at me now, and think how on rainy days I have to traipse out in the wet and go dragging around in this long skirt like a drabble-tailed chicken. And that bobbed hair yarn, I declare, I envy you. It's such a task for a working woman to do her hair when it's as long as mine, and if I slide it, why, my head looks like a stump full of granddaddies. Tom had lingered within earshot. Now he snorted, "There it goes again, granddaddies." He moved farther off. "Don't you get lonesome here?" asked Marion. Sylvia sighed. "Winters, it's lonesome. Seems like sometimes I'd die. But when spring comes, and all through the summer and fall, there's generally men passing every 3-4 days." "But no women?" "Nary from the settlements. Once a month or so, old Granny Vine comes across yon mountain, or I go to her place. The Vines live only a couple of miles from here, but it's a fearful steep climb going and coming, whar trees has fell across the trail. You have to work around them through thickets and briars that nigh tear bodies' clothes off. The Vines is wuss off than us, for there ain't no wagon road within a mile of their place. They've just a little narrower little sled track down to the big road, and a steer to drag the sled over the ground." "What do you do for pastime when the day's work is done?" "Winters, I quilt. Pretty evenings when it ain't cold weather, I often take Marchie, and we go fishing up or down the creek. I don't generally catch so very much, but I do love the smell of the woods and the clar, cool water and the sunshine dancing on the riffles and the foam surging below the little falls." "Aren't you afraid of snakes?" "Not so much. The water snakes is harmless, and Tom claims the black snakes is too. But I know better. I've seed 'em around here 6 foot long, and they're powerful spry and strong. I found one in a coil beside the trail, sound asleep. Ought to had sense enough to let it alone, but I thought of Margie playing around, and I got mad and heaved a rock as big as I could handily lift, and I dropped it right on that snake's coil. God Almighty, the rock bounced off like the snake was rubber hose, and he came at me with head 2 foot from the ground and mouth wide open. He was so quick I couldn't move nor hardly bat an eye. But he seed I was too big to swaller, so he run off in the brush. Oh, what a fright it must have given you. Are there any poisonous snakes around here?" "Tom kills a rattler now and then out in the woods. I ain't seed none myself. But a copperhead bit Tom's bird dog he had last summer. His head swelled till he didn't look like a dog no more, and he was powerful sick for days. He gradually got better, but he never was much count after that." "The big wild beasts don't come down here to your place, I suppose?" "They're around sometimes, but I ain't never yet met up with a wildcat nor much of a big bear. One evening, though, up nigh the old splash dam, me and Margie was grading along the bank through a thicket to get by a deep hole in the creek. Right thar, hope I may die if we didn't walk right up on a little cub bear. It was the cutest thing. But I knowed in reason the old mammy bear wasn't fur away, and she might wind us and come a rarin'. People, I grabbed my young'un and I lit out thar with my feet pounding the ground to beat a hen a peckin'. You could have played marbles on the tail of my skirt, I bet you. So they chatted on, marrying, asking eager questions about a mode of life that was as strange to her as if it were on the planet Mars. Sylvia answering with matter-of-fact directness in the quaint idiom of the mountaineer. The girl was thrilled by the amazing novelty of the situation. Here, only 10 miles back from a national highway in the very center of Eastern America, she was discovering a world that did not even faintly resemble the one in which she had been born and bred. It was as though she had carelessly, unwittingly stepped across some shadowed boundary of sense into a fourth dimension where even the simplest things she had learned in childhood were no longer true. She had been carried back upon the wings of time into a world primeval, and here she sat talking face to face with a daughter of Daniel Boone. Meantime, Tom, in the background and out of hearing, was growing restless. That was a confoundin' pretty girl. Too pretty to be gadding about in men's clothes weed hunting. Weed hunting, indeed. That didn't stand to reason. No such girl would be in such a fool business unless it was a blind. Now, what was she really up to? Who knew but that she might be one of those dod-gasted writers who nose into folks' private affairs and then go and print them? Or advance agent for a movie concern that would come and film the place and make him and Sylvie ridiculous? Tom was just obliged to find out more about her. He had a nice, smooth line of talk to draw her out. He would entrap her into telling the truth. Yes, it was time he was getting back to see what was going on. But as Tom rounded the house, what the devil was this? He rubbed his eyes. It was so. Sylvia had her arm around that girl, and she, Sylvia Burbank, was sniveling. He caught some disconnected phrases. Then this. Honey, I've been dying to talk to a woman person. Let's go in the house. The front room's damp yet, for I've been scouring, leastways Tom has, so let's go back to the company room. It ain't been used in a long time, but every day or so I open it wide to the sunshine and air the quilts and dust the poor little furniture. Yes, and I keep a jar of posies thar, fresh from the woods, waiting for the company that never comes. But I've come, soothed Marian. Yes, dearie, and I wished you'd stay. You must stay to dinner anyhow. I'd be right hurt if you didn't. You bet I'll stay for dinner, answered Marian heartily. Come, and we'll have a good long talk. The two women went up the steps and into the house together. Tom stood outside and glared. Good God Almighty, he gasped. Ain't Sylvia got no sense at all? She right up and told that gal I'd been a scouring. Now, it'll be all over the settlement faster than the devil can set out fire. Me scouring floors, me pushing a broom, me with my pants rolled up, slopping soap suds over the place of all the damn gossip. Now that'll be the candy, just because I hated to see Sylvie break her back and there wa'n't nobody around to spy and tattle. I done it to pleasure her, but will anybody believe that? No, every fool on Deep Creek will hot foot the news around that Tom Burbank, Big Tom, the feller that can lift a hoss, has been henpecked, begod, into scouring floors by the jumping Jericho. I'll have 10 men to lick for this. Tom blew up in a blue streak of profanity. End of chapter 2.